Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the mining equipment one more time. The asteroid station, Series 7, floated in the cold darkness of space, surrounded by nothing but stars and danger. Jake had been working here for 3 years, digging precious metals from the rock. It was hard work, but it paid well. He needed the money for his sister's medical bills back on Earth. The warning sirens began to scream through the station. Jake dropped his tools and ran toward the control room. Red lights flashed everywhere. Other miners were shouting and running in different directions. Jake grabbed his supervisor, Tom, by the arm. "What's happening?" Jake asked. Tom's face was white with fear. "HFY ships. 3 of them. They came out of nowhere." Jake felt his stomach drop. The HFY were like giant insects that walked on 2 legs. They had hard shells and many arms. Everyone knew they hated humans. They thought humans were weak and stupid. When the HFY found human settlements, they destroyed everything. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. "Maybe 10 minutes before they break through our shields," Tom said. He was already putting on his emergency suit. "Get to the escape pods." Jake looked around the control room. 20 people worked on this station. There were only 12 escape pods. Someone would have to stay behind. Jake had always been good at math. He did not like these numbers. The first explosion shook the whole station. Jake fell against the wall. The lights went out for a moment, then came back on. More explosions followed. Each one was closer than the last. "The shields are down!" someone shouted. Jake ran toward the escape pod bay, but another explosion threw him to the floor. When he got up, the corridor was full of smoke. He could not see which way to go. Emergency lights blinked red in the darkness. Jake felt his way along the wall. He needed to get to the pods before they were all gone. But when he reached the bay, it was empty. All the pods were gone. The other miners had escaped without him. Jake stood alone in the empty room. He could hear the HFY cutting through the station's hull with their energy weapons. They would be inside soon. Everyone said the HFY never took prisoners. They just killed everything they found. Jake thought about his niece Emma. She was only 6 years old and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She always asked him to bring her stories about his adventures in space. Now, he would never see her again. Another explosion shook the station. This one was much stronger. Jake heard the sound of metal breaking and air rushing out into space. The station was falling apart. He had to find somewhere safe to hide. Jake remembered the deep mine shafts. They were the strongest part of the station, built to handle the pressure of drilling through solid rock. If he could get there, he might survive long enough for a rescue ship to find him. Jake ran through the breaking station. Sparks flew from broken wires. Water pipes had burst and flooded some corridors. Behind him, he could hear new sounds, the clicking and chittering of HFY voices. Jake reached the mine entrance just as the biggest explosion yet shook the station. The ceiling began to fall. Large pieces of metal crashed down around him. Jake jumped into the mine shaft just as tons of rock and steel collapsed behind him. Everything went dark and quiet. Jake turned on his emergency light. He was trapped, but he was alive. The mine shaft stretched deep into the asteroid. He had food and water for maybe 3 days. After that, he would have to hope someone came looking for him. Jake started walking deeper into the mine. He wanted to get as far from the HFY as possible. His footsteps echoed in the darkness. He had been walking for about an hour when he heard something that made him stop. Someone was crying. Jake turned off his light and listened carefully. The sound was soft and sad. It reminded him of Emma when she had bad dreams. But that was impossible. All the miners had escaped. Jake was alone on the station. Jake turned his light back on and followed the sound. It led him to a side tunnel that had been blocked by fallen rocks. The crying was coming from behind the rocks. Jake put his ear against the stone and listened. It was definitely crying, but it sounded strange. The voice was higher than a human voice, and there were clicking sounds mixed with the tears. Jake began to move the smaller rocks. He worked carefully, making sure not to cause another cave-in. After an hour of digging, he made a small hole. He shined his light through it. What he saw made him gasp. On the other side of the rocks was a small HFY. It looked like a child, but Jake had never heard of HFY children before. The creature was about the size of Emma, with a green shell that looked soft and new. One of its arms was bent at a wrong angle. Green blood dripped from cracks in its shell. The young HFY looked up at Jake's light. Its large black eyes were full of pain and fear. It made a soft, chittering sound, like a scared animal. Jake stared at the creature. This was his enemy. The HFY had just destroyed his home and tried to kill him. Every human in the galaxy feared these creatures. But looking at this small, hurt child, all Jake could think about was Emma. The young HFY was dying. Jake could see that its injuries were serious. If he left it here, it would be dead in a few hours. If he helped it, he might be saving the life of something that would grow up to kill other humans. Jake thought about what his sister always told Emma. We help people because it's right, not because it's easy. Jake began moving more rocks. Jake woke up in a room that looked like the inside of a giant seashell. The walls curved around him in smooth, pearl-colored surfaces. Soft, blue light came from somewhere he could not see. He was lying on what felt like a bed, but it was made of some kind of living tissue that moved gently under his body. Jake tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. His mouth was dry, and his head hurt. The last thing he remembered was giving water to the young HFY in the mine. After that, everything was dark. You are awake, said a voice inside his head. Jake looked around the room but saw no one. The voice had not come through his ears. Someone was speaking directly into his mind. Who's there? Jake said out loud. I am Kexley. You saved my life. Jake saw movement in the corner of the room. The young HFY stepped into the light. She looked much better than when Jake had found her. Her green shell was now bright and healthy. The cracks had healed. Her arm was straight again. Where am I? Jake asked. You are on the ship called Endless Swarm. It belongs to my people, Kexley said. Her mental voice was soft and curious, like a child asking questions. The older ones want to understand why you helped me. Jake looked more carefully at Kexley. She was about 4 feet tall, with 6 arms and long, thin legs. Her head was larger than a human head, with big black eyes that seemed very smart. When she moved, Jake could hear a soft clicking sound from her shell. How long was I asleep? Jake asked. 7 days. You were very sick. The doctors fixed your body. Kexley moved closer to Jake. Why did you save me? I do not understand. Jake thought about how to explain. You were hurt. I could not leave you there to die. But I am HFY. You are human. We are enemies. You're also a child, Jake said simply. Kexley made a sound like wind chimes in her throat. Jake thought it might be laughter, but he was not sure. The Queen wants to see you, Kexley said. She has many questions. Before Jake could ask what Queen, the walls of the room began to change. They became transparent like glass. Jake could see that he was on a huge ship flying through space. The ship was so big that Jake could not see the end of it. Come, Kexley said. We must not keep the Queen waiting. Jake followed Kexley through corridors that looked like the inside of living creatures. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat. Other HFY walked past them, but they all stopped to stare at Jake. Some made angry clicking sounds. Others just watched him with their big black eyes. They entered a room so large that Jake could not see the ceiling. In the center of the room stood the biggest HFY Jake had ever imagined. She was 12 feet tall, with a shell that sparkled like diamonds. She had 8 arms and a crown of sharp points growing from her head. When she moved, Jake could feel the power in her body. "I am Queen Zex This," the voice said in Jake's mind. But this time, it felt like thunder. "Ruler of the 12 hives, mother of millions." Jake felt very small standing in front of her. He wanted to run, but his legs would not move. "You saved the child, Kexley," the queen said. "This action makes no sense to us. Explain." Jake took a deep breath. "She was hurt and scared. I had to help her." Jake took a deep breath. Jake took a deep breath. Had to. The queen moved closer to Jake. Each step shook the floor. "Who commanded you to help her?" No one commanded me." The queen stopped moving. Around the room, Jake could hear hundreds of Vexhi making soft, chittering sounds. It sounded like they were all talking at once. "You chose?" the queen asked. "This word does not translate properly. In our language, one obeys or disobeys. There is no choosing." Jake tried to think of how to explain. "Choosing means deciding for yourself what is right." The chittering sounds got louder. Some of the Vexhi sounded angry. Others sounded confused. "We know what humans are," the queen said. "You fight wars. You destroy planets. You take resources that do not belong to you. You are selfish and violent. But you saved one of our children for no gain. This does not match what we know." "Maybe what you know is wrong," Jake said quietly. The room became completely silent. Jake realized he had just told the queen of the Vexhi that she was wrong. He wondered if that was the last mistake he would ever make. But the queen did not attack him. Instead, she made a sound like wind through metal tubes. Jake thought it might be laughter. "Interesting," she said. "The human thinks we are wrong about humans. How can this be?" "Mine it." Jake looked around the room. Hundreds of Vexhi were watching him. Their eyes reflected the light, like mirrors. "I think maybe we're both wrong about each other," Jake said. "I thought all Vexhi were monsters. But Kexley is not a monster. She's just a child who was scared and hurt." "You compare our young to your young," the queen said. "This is not how we think. In our hives, there are only useful members and useless members. The useful members live. The useless members are removed." "What about love?" Jake asked. "What about protecting your children because they matter to you?" Again, the room fell silent. Jake could feel the queen studying him like he was a strange insect. "Love," the queen repeated. "Another word that does not translate well. You will stay with us, human Jake Morrison. We will study you. We will learn what you are." "What if I want to go home?" "Home," the queen said. "Another interesting word. Show us what home means. Show us what love means. Show us what choosing means. If these things have value, we will understand. If they do not, you will join the useless members." Jake felt cold. He understood what the queen meant. He would stay alive as long as he was interesting. When they finished studying him, they would probably kill him. But he looked at Kexley standing beside the queen's massive form, and he thought about Emma drawing her pictures of spaceships. Maybe if he could help the Vexhi understand humans better, both sides could stop fighting. "I'll stay," Jake said. "But I want to help Kexley learn about humans too." The queen's crown points flashed with light. "Very well. The experiment begins." Jake's new room was larger than the first one, with a window that showed the stars. The Vexhi had given him human food and water, though he wondered how they knew what humans ate. Every day, different Vexhi scientists came to study him. They watched everything he did and asked endless questions. "Why do you clean your eating tools?" asked Dr. Vexmon, a tall scientist with silver markings on his shell. "The food is already gone." Jake looked down at the plate he was washing. "So it will be clean for next time. Also, Dirty dishes smell bad. Smell bad, doctor. Vex's Mon repeated, writing notes on a device Jake could not understand. You make decisions based on future events that may never happen. And you care about smells that do not hurt you. Fascinating. Kexley visited Jake every day. She was the only Vex High who seemed to enjoy talking with him instead of studying him. She asked different kinds of questions. What is a sister? She asked one afternoon, while they sat by the window. A sister is a female who has the same parents as you, Jake explained. My sister Sarah takes care of her daughter Emma. Emma is my niece. And you work in dangerous places to get money for your sister's medicine? Yes. Kexley was quiet for a long time. In our hives, if a member becomes sick and cannot work, we remove them. It is more efficient. Why do humans keep sick members? Jake thought about how to explain. Because we love them. They matter to us. Even if they can't work. Even if they cost resources. Even if they make the hive weaker. Even then. Kexley made her wind chime sound. Humans are very strange, but I like strange. Jake smiled. Talking with Kexley was the best part of his days. The rest of the time, the Vex High tested him in ways that made no sense. They put him in a room with a broken machine and watched him try to fix it. When he succeeded, they seemed surprised. They gave him puzzles that had no solutions and timed how long he worked on them before giving up. They showed him pictures of Vex High and asked him to guess which ones were dangerous. Jake was wrong every time. Your species is not logical, Dr. Vexmon told him after one particularly frustrating test. You waste time on impossible problems. You cannot identify threats correctly. You should have died out long ago. Maybe logic isn't everything, Jake said. One day, the tests changed. Dr. Vexmon brought Jake to a large room where several Vex's High workers were struggling with a broken engine. The machine was huge and complicated, with parts that glowed and hummed with energy. Our engineers cannot solve this problem, Dr. Vexman said. The engine has a design flaw that causes it to overheat. We have tried 17 different solutions. All have failed. Jake walked around the engine, looking at how the parts fit together. He could see the problem immediately. The cooling system was fighting against itself. You need to reverse the flow in this section, Jake said, pointing to a cluster of pipes. And add a bypass here. The coolant is getting trapped in a loop. Dr. Vexmon stared at him. You understand this machine? You have never seen Vex High technology before. Engines are engines, Jake said. The principles are the same. Heat has to go somewhere. The Vex High engineers made the changes, Jake suggested. The engine ran perfectly. Dr. Vexmon wrote many notes. After that, they brought Jake more broken machines. He fixed all of them. The solutions were simple, once you looked at the problems from a human perspective. How do you see answers that we cannot see? Dr. Vexmon asked. I don't know. Jake said honestly. I just look at what's broken and think about how to make it work better. But our collective mind considered thousands of possibilities. How can one individual mind succeed where thousands fail? Jake thought about that. Maybe because I'm looking at it differently. Your minds all think the same way. My mind thinks in a way you've never tried. Word of Jake's successes spread through the ship. More Vex High came to watch him work. Some seemed impressed. Others seemed angry that a human could solve problems they could not. Queen Zexthis summoned Jake to her throne room again. You have repaired 7 machines that our best engineers could not fix, she said. You have answered questions that our collective intelligence could not solve. Explain how this is possible. I think it's because I'm different from you, Jake said. Sometimes being different is useful. Different how? Jake tried to find the right words. Your people all think together. Like one giant mind. That makes you very smart about some things. But sometimes you need someone who thinks alone, who can see things from the outside. And this is why you saved Kexley? Because you think differently? I saved her because she needed help. I don't think your people would have saved a human child in the same situation. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. You are correct. We would not have saved a human child. We do not save anyone who is not useful to the hive. That doesn't make you evil, Jake said. It just makes you different from us. But your way of thinking helped Kexley survive, and it has helped us repair our machines. Perhaps different thinking has value we have not considered. Jake felt hope growing in his chest. Maybe the Queen was beginning to understand. There is something else. The Queen continued. Since you arrived, some of our workers have begun acting strangely. They ask questions. They make suggestions. They seem to be thinking for themselves instead of following the collective mind. Is that bad? We do not know. It has never happened before. You are changing our people simply by being here. We must decide if this change is useful or dangerous. Jake looked around the throne room. Many Vex High were watching this conversation. In their black eyes, he could see something new. Curiosity. Individual curiosity, not just the collective desire to understand. Maybe you should ask them what they think, Jake suggested. The Queen's crown points flashed with bright light. Ask them. They are part of the collective. They think what we think. But what if they didn't have to? What if they could choose what to think? Like I chose to save Kexley. The room filled with the sound of chittering voices. The Vex High were talking among themselves instead of speaking through the collective mind. Jake had never heard them do that before. The Queen stared at her people in what Jake thought might be shock. What are you doing to us? She whispered. I think, Jake said softly, I'm helping you discover that you're individuals, not just parts of a machine. Jake woke to the sound of alarms screaming through the ship. Red lights flashed in his room, and he could feel the floor vibrating under his feet. Something was very wrong. Kexley burst through his door without waiting for permission. Her usually bright shell was dark with fear. Jake, you must hide, she said, grabbing his arm with two of her hands. War Queen Vexmore is coming. She wants to kill you. Why? Jake asked, pulling on his clothes as quickly as he could. Because of what you have done to us. Many of our people are thinking for themselves now. They are asking questions the collective mind cannot answer. War Queen Vexmore says, you are a disease that will destroy our hive. Jake could hear heavy footsteps in the corridor outside his room. Many footsteps, all moving with military precision. This way, Kexley whispered, leading Jake to a panel in the wall that slid open. There are maintenance tunnels behind the walls. Kexley, this way. There are maintenance tunnels behind the walls. They crawled through narrow passages between the ship's inner and outer hulls. Jake could hear Vexmore's soldiers searching his room, their angry chittering echoing through the walls. Where is Queen Zex? Jake whispered. She is in the deep chambers, meeting with the council. They are trying to decide what to do about you, Kexley said. Half of them want to study you more. The other half want you dead. They reached a larger tunnel where they could stand up. Kexley led Jake through a maze of passages he never could have navigated alone. Kexley, Jake said as they walked. What do you think? Am I dangerous to your people? She was quiet for a moment. You have changed us. Change is always dangerous. But I have learned things from you that I never knew before. Like what? Like caring about someone even when they cannot help the hive. Like choosing to do what feels right instead of what you are told to do. Like thinking thoughts that are only yours. She stopped and looked at Jake with her large black eyes. Before I met you, I thought exactly what the collective mind thought. Now, I think my own thoughts. Is that wrong? I don't think it's wrong, Jake said. I think it makes you more than you were before. They reached a section of the ship Jake had never seen. The walls here were rougher, more like the inside of a cave. Strange machines hummed in the darkness. This is the heart of our ship, Kexley explained. The collective mind lives here. If War Queen Vexmore finds us, this is the last place she would look. But as they moved deeper into the mechanical cavern, lights suddenly blazed around them. Vex-High soldiers stepped out from behind the machines. In front of them stood a Vex-High almost as large as Queen Zexthis. But her shell was blood red instead of diamond bright. War Queen Vexmore, Kexley whispered. So, Vexmore said, her mental voice like broken glass. The contaminated child brings the disease spreader to the heart of our ship. How fitting. Vexmore moved toward them with slow, threatening steps. Her soldiers surrounded Jake and Kexley in a tight circle. You have poisoned our people with your human thoughts. Vexmore said to Jake. Our workers question orders. Our engineers ignore the collective solutions. Our young ones think they are individuals instead of part of the greater whole. Maybe that's not poison, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. Maybe that's growth. Vexmore's crown points flashed angry red. Growth? You call the destruction of our perfect society growth? We have survived for 1,000,000 years because we think as one. You have been here for weeks, and already our unity is cracking. Your unity was built on fear, Jake said. You kept your people from thinking because you were afraid of what they might think. And I was right to be afraid. Look what your influence has done. Vexmore gestured to her soldiers. Several of them stepped forward. But Jake noticed that some of them hesitated. Their movements were not perfectly coordinated like before. Even my own soldiers are infected, Vexmore hissed. You will die, human. And then, we will purge every trace of your influence from our ship. No. Kexley stepped between Jake and the War Queen. Jake saved my life. He has helped our engineers solve problems they could not solve alone. He has shown us new ways to think. You cannot kill him. You dare defy me? Vexmore towered over Kexley. You are proof of how dangerous this human is. Before you met him, you would never have questioned a War Queen's command. You're right, Kexley said, her voice growing stronger. Before I met Jake, I never questioned anything. But questioning has made me smarter. It has made me better. Around them, Jake could see some of the soldiers lowering their weapons. Others still pointed them at him, but they looked uncertain. Soldiers, Vexmore commanded, kill the human. Half of the soldiers moved to obey. The other half stood still. We choose not to, said one of the soldiers who had not moved. Vexmore spun toward him, rage burning in her eyes. You choose? You do not choose. You obey. When side, you choose. Why? The soldier asked. Why must we obey without question? What if the orders are wrong? Why? 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 Because I am your superior. But what makes you superior? Your size? Your age? Or your ability to make good decisions? The soldier looked at his companions. Jake Morrison has made better decisions than any of us. He saved Kexley when we would have left her to die. He solved engineering problems we could not solve. He showed us that we can think for ourselves. The soldiers who still followed Vexmore looked confused. Jake could see the internal battle on their faces as they struggled between old obedience and new thoughts. This ends now, Vexmore snarled. She raised her own weapon, pointing it directly at Jake. If you kill him, Kexley said quietly, you prove that he was right about us. You prove that we are monsters who destroy anything we don't understand. We are not monsters, Vexmore said. We are Vex-High. We are perfect. Perfect things don't need to kill children to protect themselves, Jake said. Vexmore's weapon trembled in her hand. Around them, more soldiers were lowering their weapons and stepping back. You have destroyed everything, Vexmore whispered. Our unity. Our purpose. Our very identity. No, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Queen Zexthis entering the chamber with her own guards. But Jake noticed that even the Queen's guards moved differently now, not in perfect unison, but as individuals who happened to be walking together. "He has not destroyed us, Vex More," Queen Zex, this said. "He has revealed what we could become." "You too?" Vex More stared at her queen. "You too have been infected by this human poison?" "I have been thinking," the queen said simply. "For the first time in my life, I have been thinking my own thoughts instead of the collective's thoughts, and I have realized something important." The queen moved to stand beside Jake and Kexley. "What we call unity was really just fear. Fear of being different. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of letting our people think for themselves. But Jake Morrison has shown us that different thinking has value. Individual choice has value. Even mistakes have value, because we learn from them." "This is madness," Vex More said. "No," the queen replied. "This is evolution." The standoff in the ship's heart chamber lasted for what felt like hours. War Queen Vex More stood with her remaining loyal soldiers on one side. Queen Zex This, Jake, Kexley, and the soldiers who had chosen to think for themselves stood on the other side. Between them hummed the great machines that had once enforced perfect unity of thought. "You force me to choose between destroying you and destroying our entire civilization," Vex More said to Queen Zex This. "No one is forcing you to choose anything," the queen replied. "That is the point Jake has been trying to teach us. We all have choices. You can choose to fight us, or you can choose to learn from what has happened." "Learn what? That chaos is better than order? That individual selfishness is better than collective strength?" Jake stepped forward. Even though several weapons were still pointed at him, "It's not about selfishness. It's about being able to care about things that matter to you personally, not just what the group tells you to care about." "Explain," Vex More demanded. "Kexley matters to me now," Jake said. "Not because someone ordered me to care about her, but because I chose to care. That makes my caring stronger, not weaker. When I saved her in the mine, it wasn't because saving her helped the human race. It was because she was a child who needed help. And that caring led you to fix our machines?" Vex More asked. "In a way, yes. When you care about individuals, you want to solve their problems. When I saw your engineers struggling, I wanted to help them succeed." One of Vex More's soldiers lowered his weapon. "I have been thinking about my nest brother," the soldier said slowly. "He was removed from our hive because he was sick. I accepted this because the collective mind said it was efficient. But now I wonder, what if I had cared about him the way this human cares about Kexley? What if I had tried to save him?" End quote. "He would have died anyway," Vex More said harshly. "And you would have wasted resources trying to save him." "Maybe," the soldier said. "But maybe not. Jake Morrison's human medicines helped Kexley heal faster than our doctors expected. Maybe there were solutions we never tried because we gave up too quickly." More of Vex More's soldiers began to lower their weapons. Jake could see the same realization spreading across their faces that he had seen in Kexley. The sudden understanding that they were individuals who could choose what to think and feel. "This is what I was afraid of," Vex More said. But her voice sounded tired now instead of angry. "Once they start thinking for themselves, they question everything, even necessary decisions. Maybe some of those decisions weren't as necessary as you thought," Queen Zexthis said gently. Vex More stared at her queen for a long moment. Then she did something Jake had never seen a Vex High do. She sat down on the floor, her weapon forgotten beside her. "I have served our hive for 300 years, Vex More said. "I have made 10,000 decisions that I believed were for the good of our people. Now you tell me that our people should make their own decisions. What was the point of everything I did?" Jake sat down across from her, ignoring the shocked chittering of the other Vex High. Queens and war queens did not sit on floors, and humans certainly did not sit down with them. The point was That you were doing your best with what you knew, Jake said. Now you know more. So, you can do better. Do better how? Let your people choose. Give them information and let them decide for themselves what they think is right. Sometimes they'll make mistakes, but they'll also come up with solutions you never thought of. Queen Zexus moved closer to them. Jake Morrison, I have been considering your situation. War Queen Vexes Moore was right about one thing. You have changed us permanently. We can never go back to the way we were. So I must ask you, what do you want from us now? Note. Jake thought about that question. A few weeks ago, he would have said he just wanted to go home. But now, things were more complicated. I want to help you figure out how to use these changes in a good way, Jake said. And I want you to help me convince my people that Vex High can be allies instead of enemies. You want an alliance between our species? I want more than that. I want to show both our peoples that we can learn from each other. Humans are good at individual thinking and caring about each other. Vex High are good at working together and building amazing things. Imagine what we could accomplish if we combined those strengths. Kexley made her wind chime sound of happiness. Could we build cities where humans and Vex High live together? Why not? Jake asked. We could explore space together, share our knowledge, solve problems that neither of us could solve alone. War Queen Vex Moore looked up at him. You truly believe this could work? I think it's worth trying. The worst thing that could happen is we learn something new about what doesn't work. Vex Moore made a sound that might have been laughter. You are either very brave or very foolish. Jake Morrison. Probably both, Jake admitted. Queen Zexthis stood up, her decision made. Very well. I will send messages to the human government requesting a meeting. We will propose an experimental colony where volunteers from both species can live and work together. And if they refuse? Vexmore asked. Then we try something else, the Queen said. That is what individuals do. They keep trying new solutions until they find one that works. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the colony ship New Harmony. Half of the ship had been built by humans, half by Vexa High. The two sections looked very different, but they worked together perfectly. Kexley stood beside him, now wearing a translator device that let her speak out loud instead of only through mental connection. Are you nervous? She asked. A little, Jake admitted. Starting a new world is a big responsibility. Good thing we're not doing it alone. Jake smiled as he watched human and Vex High engineers working together to prepare the landing site. Some of them were arguing about the best way to set up the power grid, but it was the kind of arguing that led to better solutions. Jake, Kexley said, I want to ask you something I have been thinking about. What's that? If you could go back to that day in the mine, knowing everything that would happen. Jake thought about everything that had changed. The war that was ending. The alliance that was beginning. The two species learning to understand each other. All of it had started with one simple decision to help a scared child. Yes, Jake said without hesitation. I would save you again. Even though it was dangerous? Even though you didn't know what would happen? Especially because I didn't know what would happen. That's what makes it a choice, instead of a calculation. Down on the planet's surface, human and Vex High children ran and played together in the alien sunlight. They were learning each other's games and inventing new ones that neither species had thought of before. Jake Morrison, the mining engineer who had saved an enemy child, watched the beginning of a new kind of civilization. One built not on perfect unity or individual selfishness, but on the simple idea that different kinds of thinking could work together to create something better than either could achieve alone. And in the ship's school, human and Vex High children sat together as Kexley taught them the most important lesson Jake had ever learned, that sometimes the best choice is the one that makes no sense at all, except to your heart.